Imperative verbs are those that command and are relatively easier to memorize compared with the other forms of verbs in Spanish. The singular familiar nominative pronoun to, affirmative command, with the exception of a few irregular verbs, is formed like the third-person singular of the present indicative. Imperative form of regular AR ending verbs end in a, and ER and IR ending verbs end in e. So for example, the indicative form hablar, to speak, has the imperative form tú habla, comer, to eat, tú come, desistir, to desist, tú desiste. Without exception, the plural is formed by changing the final R of the infinitive to D. The present subjunctive of the second person singular in plural must be used for all negative familiar commands. So, for example, the vosotros form of hablar, to speak, is hablad. Of comer, to eat, is comed. For desistir, to desist, desisted. Imperatives are either direct commands ordering someone else to do something, like close a door, or indirect, suggesting a course of action or expressing a desire, like let's go, may he rest in peace, let them wait. Direct imperatives, as these are addressed to a second person, you, their form will vary depending on whether the command is singular, plural, formal, or informal, corresponding to the four ways of saying you in Spanish: tú, usted, vosotros, or ustedes. The informal or familiar imperatives tú and vosotros have a special form when they are affirmative or ordering someone to do something. The form of affirmative commands for regular verbs is as follows. The pattern for the tú imperative command is a, e for AR, ER, and IR ending regular verbs, and ad, ed, id for vosotros for AR, ER, and IR ending regular verbs respectively. Certain rules for tú commands. First, affirmative tú commands have the same form as the third person singular of the present indicative. Examples: mezcla los huevos en el recipiente, mix the eggs in the bowl, come más pollo, eat more chicken, escribe la receta, write the recipe. Second, negative tú commands of AR verbs are formed by adding es to the stem of the first person singular of the present indicative. Example: no peles las papas ahora, don't peel the potatoes now, no cortes las cebollas todavía, don't cut the onions yet, no tuestes el pan, don't toast bread. Third, most of the negative tú commands of ER and IR ending verbs are formed by adding AS to the stem of the first person singular of the present indicative. Examples: no hiervas las salsas, don't boil the sauce, no batas los huevos, don't beat the eggs. In the case of two commands with one object pronoun, with the affirmative commands, the direct and indirect object pronouns must follow the command form and be attached to it. When an object pronoun is attached to a command form of two or more syllables, An accent mark is added to show that the stress of the original verb remains the same. So for example, instead of saying buy the fried chicken or compra el pollo frito, shorten it by saying buy it. So attach lo, the pronoun lo, to compra, but take note of the accented O, the first O. Compralo. With negative commands, direct and indirect object pronouns are placed between no and the command form. So, how would you shorten the following examples? Don't pay the bill, no pagues la cuenta. Don't pay it, no la pagues. Or don't serve the fish to the client, no le sirvas el pescado al cliente. To form the affirmative vosotros command, drop the R of the infinitive and add D. Like in the case of hablar, drop R, change R with D. So you say hablad. In the case of decir, drop R, so it becomes decid. Cerrar, cerrad. Abrir, abrid. Hacer, haced. Now in the case of id, what is the infinitive form? Of course, ir. Okay. With the reflexive pronoun os, the D of the ending is dropped, but this does not apply to the verb ir, to go. It remains idos. Now in the case of the infinitive levantar, to get up, the imperative form is levantad, but to attach os, you drop D, so you have levantaos, get up. Callar, callad, callaos, be quiet. To attach a direct pronoun to a vosotros command, drop D, add os, plus the direct pronoun. So to say wash them, so you have the infinitive lavar, but to form the imperative, drop R, change it to D, but to add os and las, you have to drop D, but accent the final vowel, so you have lava os las, wash them. Also in the case of poner, to say put it on, you drop R, change it to D, but to make put it on, to attach os and lo, you have to drop D, accent the final vowel sound, so you have pone oslo. Imperatives using the polite you, usted, or ustedes require the present subjunctive form. Example, to say open that door, say abra esa puerta, close the window, cierren la ventana, don't go, no vaya, don't go out, no salgan. Formal commands of AR ending verbs add e, and formal commands of ER and IR ending verbs add a to the stem of the first person singular of the present indicative. Examples: hable con el médico, speak to the doctor, piense antes de tomar demasiado, think before drinking too much, pídale una receta el médico, ask the doctor for a prescription, coma comida saludable, eat healthy food. For the plural commands, add en to the usted command form. Example, piensen antes de hablar, think before speaking, atiendan bien a los pacientes, take good care of the patients. Negative commands are formed by adding no in front of the imperative verb form. Examples: no coma ese pescado, don't eat that fish. No tomen tantas pastillas, don't take so many pills. Subject pronouns may be used with commands for emphasis or clarification. As a rule, they are placed after the verb. Example, piense usted, you think. No hablen ustedes, don't talk. With affirmative commands, direct and indirect object pronouns must follow the command form and be attached to it. An accent mark is added to commands of 2 or more syllables to show that the stress of the original verb remains the same. With negative commands, direct and indirect object pronouns are placed between no and the command form. So examples to say don't get sick, no se enferme. Don't do a physical exam on her, no le haga. All pronouns, whether reflexive, direct object, or indirect object, are added to the end of affirmative imperatives, that is, those telling someone to do something as opposed to telling them not to do something. If a pronoun is added, a stress mark will be required except in the few cases where the imperative has only one syllable. Examples: tell me, dígame, sit down, siéntense. If two pronouns are added, then the indirect object pronoun will precede the direct object pronoun. A stress mark will always be required if two pronouns are added. Take the case of tell him about it, dígaselo, pass it to me, pásenmelo. If the imperative is negative, the pronouns return to their normal position immediately before the verb. Examples: don't tell him about it, no se lo diga, don't pass it to me, no me lo pasen. There are two ways to give a direct command to a group of people that includes yourself. First, vamos a plus infinitive, and second, the nosotros form of the present subjunctive. Vamos a is also used to express a simple statement or to ask a question. The interpretation of let's results from intonation and context. So in the case of let's call the plumber, you have vamos a plus the infinitive llamar and then the object al plomero. Let's talk with the carpenter. Hablemos con el carpintero. Let's not look at the fire. No miremos el fuego. Again, nosotros affirmative commands are formed with the first person plural of the present subjunctive. So you've got hablemos, let us speak. Comamos, let us eat. Abramos, let us open. Digamos, let us tell. Hagamos, let us have. Pongamos, let's put. But take note of the exception. Ir, to go, and irse in the affirmative imperative become vamos and vámonos. With pronouns attached, you've got hablemosle, let's talk to him. Cerrémosla, let's close it. Abramoslo, let's open it. Hagámoslo, let's do it. With nos and se, drop the final s of the verb. So you got digámoslo, let's tell it to him. Vámonos, let's leave. Levantémonos, let's get up. Callémonos, let's be quiet. Lavémonoslas, let's wash them. Pongámonoslo, let's put it on. While subjunctive verb forms are generally used for nosotros commands, the verb ir uses the indicative form vamos to express let's go. However, to express let's not go, the subjunctive no vayamos is required. So to say let's go to the theater, say vamos al teatro. Let's not go to the movies, no vayamos al cine. Object pronouns are attached to the affirmative and precede the negative commands. In affirmative commands with an attached pronoun, an accent mark is added to maintain the original stress. In the negative imperative, pronouns precede the verb. To say, let's not talk to him, no le hablemos. Let's not close it, no la cerremos. Let's not do it, no lo hagamos. Let's not get up, no nos levantemos. Let's not wash them, no nos las lavemos. Pronouns are added to the end of affirmative imperatives using the tu and vosotros forms in the same way as they are added to formal imperatives. A stress mark is required in some cases in order to keep the stress on the same syllable of the imperative as it was before the pronoun is added. When the reflexive pronoun os is added to the end of the imperative, the final D disappears to avoid confusion with the past participle being used as an adjective. To form the familiar to commands in the negative, use the present person singular present tense form of yo and replace the o ending with s for ar ending verbs and as for er and ir ending verbs. Negative commands, those that tell someone not to do something, require the present subjunctive. Some verbs have spelling changes in the stem. In the following, the final consonant of the stem must be changed in order to preserve the pronunciation. In the case of negative imperatives, pronouns return to their normal position before the verb, as we saw with formal imperatives. Those irregular in the affirmative are regular in the negative. Verbs ending in kar, gar, and zar change spelling in the formal commands in order to keep the same sound of the first person singular of the present indicative. Verbs ending in kar change the c to ku. Verbs ending in gar are spelled with gu, and verbs ending in zar change the z to c. Indirect commands using the first person plural are used to suggest a course of action, as follows. In the case of reflexive verbs, the final S is lost before adding the pronoun. In informal situations, it is more common to use vamos a plus infinitive than the subjunctive form. In the case of the verb ir, the subjunctive form is seldom used. When a command is being given to one person but is meant to be carried out by another, use que plus subjunctive verb plus the subject. Object and reflexive pronouns always precede the verb. In a negative statement, no also precedes the verb. When a subject is expressed, it generally follows the verb.